Good day. This is David Shea of Shea's Holistics, and I'm so glad you could join me. When I meditated this morning, I wasn't entirely sure what the topic was going to be for the video for this week. And then my guides told me that to just let whatever comes to mind be the topics that we discuss. So a number of things came to me, and I wrote them down, have them in front of me here so we can talk about them. The first thing I'd like to discuss is the incoming energies, and we've talked a lot about them, but I had a couple of phone calls yesterday where people thought there was medical issues going with them or happening, and that wasn't the case, and it had to do with these energies. So I'm going to make it relatively quick here. As we've discussed, the incoming energies are very high frequency, very fine and feathery. They're raising the frequency of the planet, of our soul group, and of course us individually as we absorb these energies and integrate them into our spiritual path and growth. However, these energies that are part of our soul group, some people in the soul group are caught in fear, tension, doubt, the lesser emotions of the ego, and our emotional baggage. Others are very much connected with and flowing with the spiritual unfoldment that is happening upon the earth, and there's a mix of everything in between. However, because we all live on the earth and we live in bodies, our first three chakras can pick up on the energies of others. The first, second, and third chakra, which are the root, sacral, and solar plexus, are the energies of the lesser self, the low self and ego. My mentor called them the animal energies. They're the energies also that the animals have as well, except not as well developed. That's a discussion for another day. But what these chakras do, amongst many, many things, is they can also pick up on the energies that are out there in our soul group. So as people are out there vibrating these lesser energies, if we don't have our little protective bubble around us and keep ourselves grounded and connected, like we do in the end of every one of our videos, and I recommend using one if you need to do that, is we're picking up on the tension, and if we're not attentive, it can, especially if we have some emotional baggage that's related to whatever the tension is, we can bring it into ourselves unknowingly and feel it, thinking, oh my goodness, what's going on here? Is something coming up? Well, there could be something coming up for us, but in this case, for both of the people that called, it had to do with the soul group. And because these are lower vibrations, they're like resistors or resistance. So as the high energy comes in, it gets blocked by this, and it can cause headaches, dizziness. Sometimes, what do they call that when you go at a very big height and the world starts spinning a little bit? You get a little bit of that going on, as well as it can cause a little bit of physical uneasiness in the abdominal area, such as a little mild nausea or other physical uneasiness. Now, I don't want to just encourage anyone to not look at medical issues if there are some present, but if this is something that's atypical for you and you are very much a spiritual person, just be aware this could be the cause, because I was seeing it with 2 or 3 people yesterday, including Deborah. I was aware of the energies, but they were being pulled into Mother Earth and transmuted into light, which is what happens when we use the bubble and the grounding and the connection. Now, the next subject is related to the first one, and it is the Wheel of Fortune. We've all seen the Wheel of Fortune, and I don't mean the game show. And it's the Wheel of Life, it's also known as. And in the Wheel of Life, you have the outer rim that goes up when our fortunes are increasing in life, however that is for us. And then, of course, as all wheels do, on the other half goes down. The outer rim, in spiritual terms, in Hinduism and Buddhism, is called the samsara. It's the whirlpool of life. It's the energies of being out there in the world and just being spun around by them. Now, in the middle is the axis mundi, the axis of the Wheel of Life, or the Wheel of Fortune. That is known as nirvana in spiritual terms. And nirvana, as Joseph Campbell talked about it, was a psychological center where we're neither motivated by desire or fear. We just stay centered in our divine connection, which is one of the things that we talk about again with the bubble, the grounding, and the connection to our higher guidance. That's one of the things that it does. Now, I've seen a lot of spiritual teachings out there. They say, time of duality is over. We don't have to be in it. And that is absolutely true so long as we are in the center, operating from that. In standard Christianity, when one is born again or it moves into their spiritual life, they're moving into their spiritual heart. And as many of us know, there's 3 chakras beneath the heart and 3 chakras above the heart. If you think about it, it is the center chakra. It is the axis of this wheel of fortune. So if we're living from the heart center and spiritually centered, then things can happen around us. We deal with them, but we're not caught up in them. However, if we live in our lesser self, ego, get caught up in that, and it can happen to any of us from time to time, where, just some aspect of ourselves, some part of our emotional baggage that we didn't know about springs up. We get caught up in it before we know it, and we find ourselves operating out there on the wheel of fortune. The beauty of it is we don't have to stay there. Once you become aware of it, recenter, and things can just smooth themselves out by doing that. But I thought I'd bring that up because of that. And that's going to tie to our last topic as well. But before I get to that, I want to talk next about the power of intention. We talk about it all the time in our monthly meditations. And I want to share a personal experience. I've put this in my posts as well, and I may have put it in one of the other videos, but this really proved to me how powerful intention is. I have a friend of mine, and I've talked about her. She can see auras like most of us see television. I mentioned that in the last video. She could also read tea leaves, although the reality was the tea leaves were just something she liked to use so that if she told us something we didn't like, she would say, well, that's what the tea leaves say. And it wasn't what was coming through her, although that's how things really were coming through. But that was all right. I knew that, and that was fine. So with that said, she was going to be in the area. This is some years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. And I got the message to go see her. So I did. And so when I was there seeing her, and we were doing this exercise, and I've talked about this before, and we were doing the bubble, the protective bubble of light. And on the outside of this bubble was going to be the layer of indigo blue, which is the spiritual armor of light. It's another layer of protection. It's really helpful, especially if we unknowingly open ourselves up to lesser energies that can keep them out. Anyway, they said, well, put indigo blue on the outside of your bubble. Well, as I mentioned before, I'm colorblind. I'm red-green colorblind. I see colors, but I don't see them the same way everyone else does. And I have no real idea what indigo blue actually looks like. So I thought, well, I'll just imagine that indigo blue is on the outside of my aura. So I did that and I left. And then later I talked to her on the telephone, and I said, so how does my aura look? And because she could see them very clearly, as I mentioned. And she says, oh, you have the normal mix of colors. And an abnormally large amount of indigo blue on there, because we hadn't discussed it earlier. And I said, wow, I don't even know what indigo blue looks like, but I just intended it to be there, and it was there. And that proved to me all we have to do is set our intentions and do the other things that are in line with that, and we can really move our spiritual life forwards very quickly. The next topic is past lives. I hear spiritual and theological discussions and sometimes arguments about this, about past lives, yes or no, are they real or not real? And I'm going to share the perspective that perhaps it doesn't matter. And I'm going to use a common fear to illustrate this. Let's say we have thalassophobia. I think I've said that right. It's the fear of deep water. Anyway, it's thalassophobia. Let's say there is reincarnation, and in some past life we drowned in the deep ocean somewhere on a ship. And now, in the next life, that fear came with us. We didn't deal with it, and it kept coming with us into the present day, where we still have fear of deep water for some unknown reason. So, there it is. It was caused from 3 or 4 lifetimes ago, whenever it happened, but it's with us now. Now let's look at if there are no past lives. And we still have thalassophobia. That could be a genetic predisposition. It could have been influences from our family, the culture, perhaps some programming we had from a child. But nevertheless, we have thalassophobia in our present existence. There's energies and emotions associated with it from this life. But if we go back to what we just talked about before, if it came from a past life, there's still energies and emotions and psychological connections to it that are with us now. The point is, whether there is or isn't a past lives, and whatever issues were with us in the past, or if we believe this is the only life, or with us in this, that were created in this life, all of them are with us now, and we need to deal with the energies, emotions, and the connections that cause us the issues so that we can release them into the light and be connected to our higher guidance, our higher nature that doesn't have that as an issue at all, because all of us are perfect beings in our high self. So I just thought I'd share that. I don't know why that came up as a topic, but it did. That brings us to another topic that I've had this happen to me so many times, and I'm sure many of you have as well. I wonder sometimes, are these my thoughts or our thoughts, or are they their thoughts? Their being our higher guidance, the divine. And I'm going to use my friend who reads tea leaves again. So one day I had another time I had the message I should have my tea leaves read, as I was talking about before. Kind of just threw that in for the previous conversation. And as it came to mind, I said, yes, I should get it. So I went down there because she was visiting the area, and we're going to do the tea leaves, and a couple other people hadn't had their tea leaves done for like forever, and I felt like, you know what, let's let them do it. So they had their tea leaves read, and it would take 45 minutes to an hour to do each tea leaf reading. So by the time it was done, we'd been there for a while, and I thought, you know what, this wasn't all that important. I'm just going to skip my tea leaf reading. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, she and I both got that the Father wanted me to have a tea leaf reading. And basically it wasn't a tea leaf reading, as I mentioned. She gets the information directly from source, from the Father or the angels or whomever, and relays it. She just uses the tea leaves as I think of it as a crutch, so that she can say, you know, it's not me telling you again, it's the tea leaves. They're the ones. Anyway, all of a sudden I realized it was never my idea in the first place. Having this tea leaf reading, I thought it was my idea, but it was really the Father's, or our higher guidance, or an angel's, whoever it is that we connect and work with. That can be the influence that puts a thought into our head that we think is ours. Just thought I'd bring this up in case this has happened to you. Just know if that does, it's awesome when it happens. Just know it's a real blessing when our thoughts are their thoughts. And finally, this ties to the Wheel of Fortune and the incoming energies. And I call it shiny objects and spirituality. I had a post about this. And I used to go to a spiritual healer who's passed now. He healed many, many people of cancer and all kinds of things during his lifetime. He was an incredible healer. Anyway, and whenever you came to see him, anyone, we all knew that when he started talking about, he would talk about things in, I will say, fanciful or fictional terms. But whenever he did that, he's talking about us. He's telling, we better pay attention, take notes. And he starts talking about all these things and the other realms, and how it could be something ridiculous like a cloud fairy, but somehow metaphorically that ties to what it is we need to know. And he said to me, he says, at the higher levels, almost anything is true. However, in our spiritual lives, we need to be grounded here and connected to our higher guidance. And it's kind of a mantra. You'll know by anyone that listens to our meditations. This is certainly something I've taken to heart, and it's certainly true in Deborah and our lives. That for spirituality to be effective and useful, it needs to be grounded so that we can live spiritually, but also apply it in our regular lives. At least that's our approach. So a lot of times what he talked about were all these what he called shiny objects that were out there, that real flashy, and they're real appealing. But after we go through and maybe we learn about the shiny objects, or we do the course or whatever, we find out later that our life is kind of where it was to begin with. Things haven't changed. So what my mentor June Distel always encouraged, and this healer we're talking about, is find out what resonates in your life, what's true for us. Because each of us has a unique connection to God, to the divine. Each of us has unique energies and processes, and our spiritual processes happening in our life that aren't necessarily happening the same way in someone else's life. So the flashy isn't always the spiritual for us. It might be something else. And I've met a couple of, actually a number of spiritual masters, and if you didn't have a conversation with them, you might just think they're just some old person sitting there on the park bench or something. They don't necessarily advertise. There's not a lot of fireworks. There's not a lot of fanfare. It's only in interacting with them and asking them questions that the depths of their spirituality become present, and that's what we're talking about. And lastly, when I talk about shiny objects, and that's a different thing for each person, we got to find out. The shiny object for one person could be the grounded thing for someone else, so keep that in mind. But our low self and ego are attracted to shiny objects. They're distractions from our true path, including spiritual ones. So with that thought, those are the topics that came through to talk about today. I hope that's helpful for you. And until next time, blessings, light, and love, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.